fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Welcome back into the House of Mystery. Of course, I'm Al Warren, and we've got Mr. John Copenhaver.
Hey, Al, how you doing?
I am delicious.
Oh, great. That's good.
Oh, I thought I'd shock you better than that.
Oh, yeah, I know. You can't shock me, Al. I'm unshockable. These are unshockable times.
Well, I know after that performance, you were great. You were the guy in blue in the Paris openings of the...
Oh, yeah, I know.
The guy singing.
The scandal.
Yeah. But you looked good.
Hey, that's all that matters.
You know,
That's all that matters.
Body, makeup, you looked wonderful. I liked it.
There's a lot to get off, though.
It's still on. You're still sparkling.
It's still sparkling.
Yeah. Well, sparkling. We've got a debut author. And what can I say? Fascinating book. It's called You Know What You Did. So, KT Nguyen, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me on, you guys. I'm so excited to be here.
Calm down. Calm down. It's been a rough
He's going to fix that.
Yeah, don't worry. We'll have you crying within an hour. First of all, it's your debut, so that's exciting, and it looks like you're doing really well, and you're kind of getting a lot of exciting, good reviews and everything like that. So you must be thrilled with the results of your first book.
I am. I'm already working on my second book, though, so that's the way it goes, I guess. I am excited. It was an exciting launch, and I'm really happy with how it came out.
And that's always the tough time, because when you get a book and then you start writing, you're already writing your second one or your next book, and then you start to do the promotion for the first one,
Exactly.
And it's a thriller. Is there a particular reason you went for kind of this darker psychological sort of thriller? Is there something about that kind of genre that led you there?
There is. I know you're supposed to read widely and read outside of your genre, but I just was on during COVID, I was in a really big thriller binge reading. I still haven't left that phase. I read thrillers and domestic suspense, psychological suspense. I read mysteries. I read them constantly. I'm a voracious consumer of the genre, and that's why it just made sense to write something in that genre.
What do you find the most exciting part of it? Is it kind of the the tension, keeping the tension high, or creating obstacles? Like what kind of thing? No,
definitely not. I read those, but sometimes those are just too tense for me. I actually just like the character studies, the unseemly side of what your neighbors are doing or what the person down the street's doing. Just the character studies.
You live next door to John.
I don't live far from John.
Not too far.
So what's it like writing a story about John, and having it?
Nothing unseemly over here. It's all very wholesome.
That would be book 2 or book 3.
So listen, your main character, I believe it's Annie Shaw or Annie Shaw. What's your relationship with her?
Well, she's a first-generation Vietnamese American artist. I'm a first-generation Vietnamese American writer. And Annie is somebody who experiences obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD. And that's something that's very personal to me. I, myself, have lived with OCD for decades. And when I was coming up with the idea for this book, You Know What You Did, I thought, what is the scariest thing in my mind? And the scariest thing would be if my compulsive thoughts, the intrusive thoughts, came to life and they manifested themselves in the real world. All the dark thoughts, all the disturbing things you think or worry about, what if they actually happened? And so that was the motivation for writing the book.
Well, how much of your OCD do you put into this? Like when you carry yourself, how much of you is in Annie? That's the way to say it.
Exactly. In terms of the OCD portion, it's directly lifted from my experience. Not now, because my OCD is managed now, but before, when it wasn't treated, I would say my experience is completely parallel to Annie. And if anything, it was more severe than hers.
You think that, when you're I know this book well, and I thought that you handled sort of the tension between a character, questioning themselves, and then the reader kind of questioning, what was real. How difficult was that for you to weave into the plot? I mean, was it difficult to balance those two things?
I think it's interesting because OCD in particular, it's often nicknamed the doubting disease, or the doubting disorder, because you doubt yourself. In severe cases of OCD, you question whether or not you even did something. Did I wash my hands? Did I touch that? Did I do this? And you're plagued by these thoughts that can make you feel like a prisoner in your own body. You don't know what the person who is your physical self did. And so it's interesting that to the reader, it makes Annie an unreliable narrator, kind of the ultimate unreliable narrator. So you don't know because she doesn't know what she did.
Yeah, and I think the other concept that really comes into play, which is a word that is getting a lot of play these days, is gaslighting, which is sort of the flip side of this, where someone makes you feel crazy.
Right.
Is there sort of something you're exploring with that idea here as well? Because I do feel like a lot of the book is about exploring mental health and how others respond to it and how all that plays out.
I mean, definitely. I think that the mental health aspect of the book has gotten really positive reception from people with OCD who see themselves on the page like an accurate portrayal versus some like silly, lighthearted version of OCD, which is what you usually see.
Yeah.
They appreciate the darkness of the portrayal because that's what a lot of people experience. And then those without OCD read it and they kind of find the experience to be eye-opening. Like, wow, this is like they're seeing themselves, allowed to put themselves into someone else's shoes and experience the world through the lens of someone with this mental health condition.
Do you think that in terms of structuring the plot, was this something that you planned out ahead? Are you a plotter, or are you more of a, as we say, I hate the term, pantser?
I write a 3-act summary, which is based, and I write I wrote a letter, a query letter, before I wrote the book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I don't do an outline. I want to make sure I have a solid concept. And it changed a bit, but I would say 80% of the query letters stayed the same after I wrote the book and what I sent to editors. So the actual meat of the book, the in and out of it, I'm just pantsing. But I know I basically had the part 1, 2, and 3. And in terms of the structure, I think I'm shaking it up a bit for my book too. This one, I followed more of a traditional, like a bit more slow build. And I think readers now of the genre, the thriller genre, they want fast, fast, fast.
You mentioned to me, I think when we were chatting before about, these days, slow burn being a dirty word. I personally don't, as a reader, think it's a dirty word. I actually really enjoy slow burn. Some of my favorite writers, like Patricia Highsmith, I think you could classify her as a slow burn writer. But you mentioned, of course, there's a sort of appetite for pacing. Do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, or is it just a thing?
Well, it's something I'm wrestling with, because before I wrote this book, I'd say 80% of the authors I read were the British and Canadian, Australian psychological thriller writers. Robin Harding, Lisa Jewell, Andrea Mara, Sally Hepworth, and those tend to be not as fast-paced, plot-driven, and more character-heavy. Like, they've all adapted a bit, but they tend to dwell a little more on the character and have a bit of a slower pace than American thriller writers. And so it could just be a matter of marketing, whether it's marketed as a slow burn suspense or marketed as a thriller. I think when readers, especially in this country, and I'm in just this U.S. market right now, North American market, they see the word thriller and they automatically expect nonstop thrills and fast pacing. So I think that it's definitely something I struggle with.
Yeah, and European, definitely way slower burns.
Yeah.
European. I like that better myself.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, not only that, it's just I like to How do you explain it? You sort of almost stay in that world.
That's exactly it. I was reading B.A. Paris's latest book, The Guest. I think it's her latest book. And I just like being in that world and living as the character for a while. But I think it's a double-edged sword. People like thriller, the word thriller or psychological thriller. Ever since Gone Girl, it has this commercial appeal. But on the other side of the coin, people have set expectations now. Like, especially I think in the U.S., like readers want fast, fast, fast. So I'm playing with it for my second book. It's not going to be totally plot driven and fast because I love character, but I think it'll be a little bit pacier.
Are you finding that the most challenging?
I think the most challenging part of the experience overall is, and you you guys can dissuade me. I'm not supposed to do this. I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I do read my reviews of Goodreads reviews, my reader reviews.
You're insane.
I
Don't do it
know,
now.
but I keep, because my background is in marketing and market research and like looking at dissecting what customers want, what they're, and before that I was a magazine editor, so we were always focused on like readership numbers, what readers want, and so I think I'm just inclined to look and feel like I can learn something from these reviews.
Not likely. I don't have faith. I don't have faith in that, especially like, go to Goodreads and stuff. Just look at the overall number. If you got 1,000 reviews and you got 4 out of 5, you're doing great.
Yeah. I think for me, that's exactly what I check. I don't read into the reviews. That's not to say that some of them aren't, incredibly articulate and thoughtful. It's just, it's a little bit of a landmine of, there's a lot of those reviews, there's a lot of trash.
I'm building up a thick skin.
Yeah, well, not only that, you have to kind of think how much of it is about the person writing the review and what they're living, like what they're going through when they read the book and when they're writing, because so much of it is emotional.
Right, and it's interesting now too because so many of the readers are reading on audiobook, and so you get reviews that are about. I'm actually keeping that in mind for book 2 as well, because this book, I think I wanted the beginning third to be kind of disorienting. You don't know exactly what's going on. You're kind of feeling lost like Annie is, which when you're reading it on the page, you can go back, you can look, and you can process it. But when you're listening to the audiobook, I think it makes it a little trickier for readers, which is something I didn't anticipate, but is such a big, growing way that readers consume books.
But you have to be careful on those, because I notice in a lot of the audios, like even I've done, people are reviewing the reader more than the story.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, you want a good reader.
Or if it's just that, I think certain books lend themselves more to audio, like plot-driven, dialogue-heavy books. And I choose what to listen to, what to read as an audiobook, and then what to read on the page or on my Kindle or whatever, on my e-reader. Because I just feel like certain books are better as audiobooks and certain books are better being read. But
so what do you think? Because when you're talking OCD and stuff like that, so what is it that everyone gets wrong? What is it that people don't really understand?
I think people think of it as an adjective, as a character trait. I'm so OCD when they're being particularly neat or orderly. And in reality, for a lot of people, it's the intrusive thoughts aren't just about being neat or counting a certain number or, washing your hands. It's actually the intrusive thoughts can be very dark and very disturbing. They can take over your life. You can feel like you have to do these things. You have to obey these thoughts. And it can be a very dark condition and a difficult experience. Luckily for me, in my early 30s, very early 30s, I found a specialist. Most people go and have cognitive behavioral therapy, exposure therapy. For me, it was more genetic, and I ended up responding beautifully to medication. Like, it totally was like a light switch. My life changed completely with medication, which is it's much less common, but I was lucky to have found a course of treatment that was able to manage my condition so well.
That's great. I mean, that's great when it works out like that.
Yeah, I happened to live where in the Bay Area at the time, where some of the top experts lived, and so I had a really great experience, because you can waste a lot of time if you don't see people who are specialists in OCD, because people do treat the condition lightly. It's not just in media or on TV. I think in general people think of it as, just a quirky thing. But I think it is really important to see a specialist.
I hear if you stop drinking soda pop out of cans, you'll get better.
Did you see that on News?
Oh, no. I can just throw that out. It's around somewhere. You know what I mean?
Oh my God.
You can say, or, Sally uses lavender oil on her arms and she feels great. She hasn't had the need to kill anybody in a long time.
That stuff, it just drives me nuts because a lot of people buy it. I mean, literally, they buy it,
Yeah.
And then they don't get the help they need instead of, I don't know. I think it's such a problem, that kind of, the sort of junk advice, pop medical advice out there. I think I have someone that's very close to me that has OCD, and I know that really lucky to, that they got help early in their life to figure it out. And, and I think that's because it has help, but culture is just like, goodness.
And you might not know you have it for a long time if you don't have the version that you see on TV.
Right. Of course. And, if you watch TikTok's got to be the self-help place. I've never seen so many, don't eat this, stop eating that, don't drink this, don't drink, and then they sell you.
Mushrooms, everything made with mushrooms.
Yeah, and then they're selling you, then they have a supplement that they're selling you.
I saw one recently with this lady who had done, I think she's in another country, maybe Australia, and she had a huge following as a doctor, and she'd shoot all these TikToks in like a lab coat and around a hospital. She wasn't a doctor at all. She was like a total imposter, but she had a huge following of people listening to her advice.
How do you hear your main character, Annie, then? What because we're talking about OCD and stuff, and it's very close to you. Do you have a connection with your character, and do you hear the voice of that character? Do you see them? Do you picture them?
No, I pictured, when I was writing it, I did picture her, but a lot of the story it's a psychological thriller, and a lot of it is really her thoughts and in her mind. So I wanted to portray in a really raw, vivid, visceral way what she was thinking, and the way she viewed the world, and the doubts she had. So I think that was my connection to her.
Did you have sort of, when you're developing this concept, any thoughts about offering another perspective, or were you sort of set on the one perspective? Sometimes, when you're dealing with a character who may or may not be reliable, sometimes they'll offer, quote unquote, a more reliable perspective. Did you think about doing that, or was it more like, I just want this to be the experience?
I wanted this to be the experience for the reader, and then in the editing process, I think it really focused even more on Annie, like even more so on her thoughts and what she was thinking. And the only exception are there are a couple of scenes with her mother who her mother's death kicks off the events in the story. And so there's a very brief portion from her mother's point of view.
Do you think that with this sort of level, I guess I'm wondering sort of who you were kind of inspired by to write in that sort of deep, that sort of close point of view? Did you have any other authors that you were kind of looking at while you were doing that? I mean, I know generally you're reading a lot of psychological suspense, so I'm just curious. I'm just wondering if you had if Patricia Highsmith played a role in that, 'cause sometimes she writes that way too, I'm thinking. But I don't know, I'm curious.
I think there are probably definitely unconscious influences. There are also a lot of the contemporary domestic suspense authors who are from the UK and Australia, less so in the last couple years, but earlier in their careers they did write very close to one character. Now everything is multi-POV. But I mean, I like that deep dive.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Yeah, I think I think it's so fascinating, because I 100% agree, and it has been sort of a shift. I mean, I write from multiple point of view, and I do it to sort of contrast perspectives, but there's something about that immersive point of view that it does a couple things. It trusts the reader to sort of go along with it, and I like that. I also think you really do get to know that character. You bond with that character, and if it's a complex point of view, that's like kind of an interesting thing to experience as a reader. I wonder why we've trended that way. Or maybe you're taking us back. We're trending back now.
I wouldn't mind trending back or moving towards what you did with The Savage Kind and Hall of Mirrors, where it's really tight to two characters.
Right. Yeah. Like it's a requirement.
There's nothing wrong with multi-POV. I just think there's the fact that everything has to have that now. Yeah, and I think part of it is the whole trend, which I think there's a place for, but I don't love the really strong element of self-insertion where people have to have one character that they really like and can identify with and root for, like a really likable character, not even a relatable character, but a likable one. So many people want that now. It's almost like a choose-your-own-adventure type story where you're moving through this aspirational world as that character.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting. I think about the likable character a lot because I'm not particularly drawn to likable characters. I want them to be relatable. Like I can understand what they're doing. I understand their motivations.
John likes the bad boys.
I like the bad boys. I do, and the bad women too. Like, I think even saying they're bad, no, complicated is what I like. And I fear that sometimes likable equals simple or straightforward. And I reject that. I'm not interested in reading that kind of character. If they're just sort of like, oh, I got this person, there's nothing psychologically surprising here. I kind of know them. I just don't understand why readers like that. But
I'm not either. And I really, that's why I write in the genre and I like the darkness, but I have read some of the really, the so-called popcorn thrillers, and they do tend to have characters who are fairly, like, you can easily insert yourself over that character and kind of role play and read through, like an adventure story or something like that. And I mean, there's a place for it. Maybe you came home from work and you're really tired that day, and you have an hour to read, and you want to just mindlessly go through. There's a place for it, and I do read those as well. I just think there should be a place in the genre for more complex stories as well.
What was the most challenging scene or part for you to write in this book? As
a debut, it's different. I don't think there's any one challenging scene, or it was more just the experience of going through the editing process. As a debut, you work first with your agent, and they go through and edit it, and then you work with your actual editor at the publishing house, and they go through and edit it, and maybe they have a slightly different viewpoint. And as a debut, it's interesting because it's hard for me. My background is in magazines. I was a writer. I edited as well. I think I can be too easily influenced. If you have a good argument, I'll buy it. So it's as a debut, it's interesting because I feel like even between book one and working on the next one, I have more of a confidence in what I'm doing and what I want to say than I did with book one, where I was more easily I wouldn't have gone along with anything that I didn't agree with, but I just wasn't sure of myself yet. And I think that's different with the next book.
Well, how has this whole experience changed you then? How do you think you've come out of this from the beginning of this, writing the book, until now that it's out and it's in the world? How is Katie different?
Well, I've had friends who have published books, and they've told me before my book came out, they said the hardest time is going to be after it publishes. And I thought, that's silly. I don't care what readers think. I don't, I got this book done. I was like on cloud 9. I got a contract. I got this book. Everything's going great. I'm getting good trade reviews and, good publicity. And you're really excited. And then it's true. The book comes out and it's shifting goalposts. You're like, oh, first you want an agent, then you want a publisher, you want a good deal, and then next is like you want, to be on the New York Times bestseller list. is it's just trying to be, I think the most challenging thing is trying to learn to be happy with what I wanted originally, which is when I quit my corporate job to have a creative profession, which I have now, and I enjoy it. But I need to remind myself to enjoy it and to get back into the writing versus focusing on the broader experience of publishing. And it's so easy to move goalposts and compare yourself to other authors.
I think that, I hate all this publicity craziness, and I think that it's very hard to be like reminding yourself, oh, wait, why did I get in this? why did I do this? Why am I doing this? And it's like, oh, because I enjoy writing, and I think it is easy to lose sight of that because there's just so much going on. I mean, you're always chasing that sort of like, oh, well, this bit of praise or this publicity somehow satisfy some need. But the truth is, like, it's really because, I don't want to speak for you, but I think kind of what you're saying is it's about the writing. It's what makes it fun, that discovery.
Yeah, it's the experience, I think, of writing.
Working on book 2, but you don't do outlines, so did you kind of have an idea of where you were going to go with your character?
I did, and I wrote 40% of my next book and now I'm just kind of reacquainting myself with it. I have a lot of it done, but I'm reacquainting myself with it. But you teach writing, John. I'm curious because the way I wrote this first book was I just wrote a piece of it. I was working at the time. I wrote a piece of it every day, and I just went through until I was done. And the book that I have partially done, I just went and wrote all at once. And so it is interesting. Like, do you actually go back and rewrite portions? Do you go back and how do you reacquaint yourself with it?
Yeah, it's just it's like a real challenge to refine it, and then of course sometimes you second guess it, and then you over edit it, and I don't know, but I guess that's a good thing. You're looking at it again. Maybe there's something positive about that, like slowly kind of chipping away at it. But there's not like one way to handle it, and I think for me it's just relearning what I was after to begin with. And it was interesting because I'm now like a big outliner. I outlined Hall of Mirrors, and I love the experience of having an outline.
Did you outline The Savage Kind?
No, I didn't. Initially, I didn't. I did eventually, but I kind of wrote into it a bit. And I think this other book that I've been working on, which is a ghost story, I did not outline that. And so going back and revisiting it again and figuring it out has been probably an important thing to do. But man, I am now a big fan of the outlines. So maybe I'll win you over with the outline. Who knows?
Yeah, I think I can see the beauty of it and how it would cut down on work later.
Yeah, that's it. It just cuts down on work.
But I don't know. Maybe I'll try it.
I would think that you would lose some of the emotion, the feeling that you had when you initially wrote something, and then you go back to it a long time later. How do you get back into that mindset?
Well, that's the thing. That's what I'm experiencing now. You tell me.
Oh, well, there you go. You have to have a trigger then of what put you in that mindset when you originally wrote it.
Right.
Like the atmosphere of what you were around or what you were feeling. But as time goes on, these our emotions change.
Yeah.
And that's tough. That's really tough.
Yeah. It's interesting because the one that I partially almost half done with is a workplace thriller. And it's been a couple of years since I was, like, pre-COVID was when I was full-time working somewhere in an office, so not at home. So it's interesting. I think that's part of the separation. When I go back and read it, I'm like, wow, this is really good. I'm really enjoying this.
Who's this writer?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. Well, you're going to have to get a job back in the office.
Oh, no.
Yeah. I mean, it's the only way you can do it.
Or
or find a dead body in a hotel somewhere. I don't know.
You can get back in that mental space without going back there.
For sure.
I find it hard to write about it, right? I find it hard to write about the thing that I'm writing about if I'm actually in it.
Yeah. I can definitely get back into that mental space. It's just, how many of us really want to go to that mental space?
Right.
Well, I'm kind of enjoying it, actually. But no, but the thing is, for me, if you're in that space for whatever reason, like when things happen to you, like John knows recently, I lost a dog of 19 and a half years that was my companion. And that creates an emotion. So when I'm writing now, this will never be duplicated. In the future, I can go back to it.
Yeah.
But it won't be the same. I'm creating the emotion and not living it. So I think there's a difference.
Yeah.
I see a difference in when I'm writing something now. The words have a different feeling to them because it's sort of absorbed into it. Mm-hmm. Whereas it wouldn't be in a year or two now, it's not going to be the same.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the challenge, is revisiting, like picking up something emotionally 2 years later, finishing it, or a year and a half later. That's the challenge that I'm experiencing now.
Well, we're going to have to go to a hotel and kill someone and throw their body in there. And get you back into that vibrant feeling of.
No, there's a psychological thriller idea for you. Someone writing a book to get back into it, they have to start killing people.
That's a great idea, actually.
Yeah.
John, your next book.
Yeah, the writer.
That's my next book.
Katie is desperate to have another success, so she goes out and kills someone. And I can see we've got this going now.
There we go. It's writing itself.
I didn't know you guys were going to reveal my secret on this show, that I'm secretly
Well, yeah, you see, and then we're going to do a follow-up. When that book comes out, we'll have the dead person, we'll reveal who they're going to be, so nobody knows.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
And I did say I live fairly close to John, so be careful.
That's right.
Uh-oh.
Well, we'll have his relatives phoning in the show and saying, I knew it. Yeah, that's terrible. What a terrible thought. What mean people you are.
I know.
I know.
All the best people are mean people.
Yeah.
The most fun, anyway.
Loving. Yeah.
The most fun, right. Maybe that's what I meant.
Don't say that out loud. Listen, so, Katie, so how do people find you? And how do they, do you have social media? Do you have a website? Where do you like to hear from readers?
I do. I link to all my social media. I'm most active on Instagram, but I do link on my website. It's KTNGUYEN.com. That's my website. But I know it'll be hard for people to spell it.
Well, we will put it up on our website along with your book so that people can find it easily. Just one click.
Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you being here. And, of course, the book, you know what you did. And it's a novel. And it's Katie Nguyen. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, you guys. This was so much fun.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.